Good to see you. Well, we are gathered here at the end of November 2023. I don't know if it's because I'm getting to be in my 50s now and I'm reflecting over the years, and 30 years is like a blip, and it feels like it were yesterday. And it really kind of puts things into perspective as we age. Hopefully, we're aging with dignity and grace, not like aging like milk. Um, but fine wine. And with this aging or maturing, there's a perspective, I think, that if we're, beginning to follow this spiritual path, it begins to really have deeper meaning and impact in our life. And sometimes, it's really important to go to the very basics of what the spiritual path means. I think sometimes, especially myself, I have a tendency to go into high and lofty areas of deep metaphysical thought and such. And that can become very convoluted or misguided in bringing things into a practical position or an understanding of day-to-day living. So what I'm going to focus on today is basically character development and spiritual growth. Like, you can't really get more basic than that. And what we are going to look at today is a little bit from the Buddhist perspective, the biblical perspective, and surprisingly, some very rich teachings in the Arancha book. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Arancha book. We'll go into that a little bit more as the service progresses. And since I'm mentioning the Bible, if you look behind me, we do have a Bible class coming up. I'm really excited about it. I'm creating a PowerPoint presentation, so it's going to be multimedia. I'm going to be up here with my big desk and my books, and it's a dream come true. And I'll have my computer will be broadcasting on Zoom, so if you can't make it in person, you can come on Zoom and see it, or it'll be recorded if you have to miss class for whatever reason. And my right-hand lady, Mary, is going to be filling in also, so the monitors are going to be in operation. So you're going to see the PowerPoint on the monitors, and you're also going to see everyone on Zoom and see them talk and share as well. So it's going to be really interactive and wonderful. And the Bible is just vastly rich. I mean, I've been studying this for 30 plus years, and that was really my pursuit as a career at one time, was to be a teacher of theology. So I really want to share what's been meaningful and helpful for me regarding the biblical tradition. And we're going to draw from some of that today in its more practical ways in terms of moral instruction, character building, etc. But before we do that, why don't we just settle in, find the breath, relax. We just had a holiday that commemorates gratitude and thanksgiving, and it just seems to be echoing here with feeling grateful to be in the presence of all of you and to have this opportunity to share what is so very close to my heart. So thank you for this opportunity. And we thank the one true God, the one true Spirit of all, the heart of reality, the presence of purity and holiness, the guide of all souls, the Father and Mother of all spirits. And we attune our hearts and our minds to this primordial vibration of Holy Spirit that governs the worlds, supplies us with every breath, pulses our heart, and brings us into a state of true perfection and awakened knowledge. Thank you. And so it is. You know, there's a teaching within, it's called the Hadith of Gabriel or Gibriel. It's a Islamic hadith. Hadith is a story about Muhammad's life. So you have the Quran, you have the Hadith, and you have the Sirah. And these are the three holy books of Islam. And in this Hadith of Jibril or Gabriel, um, the story goes that a man dressed in white came to see Muhammad. And even though, you know, you're trekking through the desert, this man's clothes were shiny and bright, no dust was found on them. And it says that the visitor, the mysterious visitor, sat knee to knee with Muhammad, and he asked him, "What is Islam?" And then Muhammad gave his answer, "What is Iman?" which is faith. And Muhammad gave his answer. "And what is Ihsan?" And Muhammad gave his answer. And these three are the very important ladders to enlightenment within the Islamic tradition. Islam is the most exteriorized form of what it looks like to be submitted to God in your behavior, in the way that you interact with the world. Ihsan, Iman, is faith. It's your internal heart life. It's how you are towards yourself. Who are you to yourself? What are you saying to yourself? What's your interior life like? What are you motivated by? And then Ihsan, the way that Muhammad defines it in the Hadith of Jibril, is you are to act as if you're in the presence of God, even if you don't believe that. In other words, when you reach the flowering of your faith, you will know you're in the presence of God. You've never left this divine presence. So everywhere we are, we're in this transparency with the source. And so Ihsan is to behave in a way where we know God is watching, not like a boogeyman waiting to pounce, but like someone who is holding presence for us, knowing that we are perfect. And we have this ideal of perfection, or this potential of perfection or holiness within our heart. And according to our iman, or our faith, or our inner life, we can cultivate that seed and allow it to blossom into the ihsan, this pure knowing and this pure presence, so that we would be in the oneness of divine presence. And a little bit of a aside in terms of what that could look like. Maybe you've heard of Al-Hallaj. Al-Hallaj was a great Sufi, and Al-Hallaj reached this flowering of Ihsan, and his final, his great last words were, "Anal Haq, I am reality. I am reality." And he was killed for that. It's like too much, man. You got to keep it quiet. Don't say that to people that are still in Islam and Iman. They haven't reached Ihsan. Ihsan is kind of conceptual. He reached that clarity, right? I told you I wasn't going to get too metaphysical and high on you guys. But we're going to explore this idea of, and it's nicely demarcated by these three levels. You have the external behavioral level, you have the internal perceptual, moral, interior level, and then you have sort of that spiritual relationship dynamic or presence with God. And we are this multidimensional being. What we do at the behavioral level matters. But it's also, if we're living in integrity, corresponding to our interior. And if we're really in integrity, ultra integrity, then it's corresponding to this recognition that we are answering to the divine presence with every thought, word, or action. So this idea of creating this ultra integrity, or in Hebrew it's called tamim. It's oftentimes referred to as perfection of character. When somebody is tam, or in plural tamim, they've reached this awareness where their thoughts, speech, and action are all really being done for and with the divine, right? And that's the way we will operate in our everyday affairs. as well as in our private time when nobody's looking. So to move into a more Buddhist approach to this, because remember, we're talking about basically attitudinal training. Like, this is really like 101 as far as spiritual work goes. Like, cultivating the right attitude, developing the right character. And Buddha actually said that, the idea that the universe is just relative and you can do whatever you want and it's all illusion and doesn't matter, and it's a postmodernist dream where there's no meaning, there's no absolute, everything is relative. It doesn't matter who believes what, you can do what you want, and that's it. You just pretend that nobody else's point matters and you're good to go. Just keep repeating to yourself that you're right and everything will work itself out. Buddha wholeheartedly disagreed with that, as every spiritual master would. We're not creating our own reality willy-nilly. We're in a very finely tuned reality that has deep structure beyond our little cognitive bandwidth of relativism and historical position or perspective. It doesn't go according to your perspective. It goes according to your attunement or your alignment with the deep structure of reality. So Buddha said that the universe is morally attuned. It's morally attuned. So again, not to jump around and get too esoteric, but this is what you get when you get me. I can't help it, sorry. I tried for those 30 seconds. In the Kabbalah, which is the Jewish mystical tradition, the oldest text that we have of the Kabbalah is the Sefer Yetzirah. It's about the 3rd century, 4th century of our Common Era that it was the earliest copies were discovered. It's a fascinating text. And one of the things within the Sefer Yetzirah is that they're showing you how the Hebrew language and other traditions like Islam will say the Arabic language. In other words, language has a creative, sacred language has a creative potential. And if you know how to manipulate, in this case, the Hebrew letters, you can do amazing things with the forces of creation, because that's what the divine used to create. And in this Sefer Yetzirah, there's this development of a hypercube. And it's a 5th-dimensional hypercube. And remember, this is 2,000-year-old text. And so this is a 5D hypercube, and it's recognizing the 3 dimensions of our space, right? We live in 3-dimensional space. The 4th dimension is time. And according to the Sefer Yetzirah, the 5th dimension is morality. So space, time, and morality are really what we're talking about when it comes to knowing how to navigate the spiritual world. So like Buddha, the great Kabbalists would say that this universe is fine-tuned morally. That's why we have things like karma. What is karma? Well, it's a cause and effect. And the reason why it's cause and effect is it's a feedback system, and it's designed to have you adjust yourself so that you can continually align to the moral integrity of reality. And then by meeting the conditions of this deep structure or kingdom of God, you attune your life in spirit, heart, mind, and body to this reality. And that's what Jesus says in A Course in Miracles. He says the entire Course is for us to meet the conditions of reality so that we have integrity. We have the spirit, the mind, and the body in coherence so that we can open up the dimensional doors and enter the kingdom of God. The only way to do this is, again, cultivating character, cultivating morality. You cannot be an immoral, twisted person and expect to enter the kingdom of God. That's just not going to fly. So, Buddhism with an Attitude is the book that I want to pull from to develop a little bit more of this idea. This is from B. Alan Wallace. He's a great exponent of Tibetan Buddhism. And a little bit from B. Alan Wallace. Spiritual practice is not a shortcut to the American dream, nor is it an embellishment to a comfortable life. So Dharma, this is the Buddha's teaching, right? Dharma could also mean this deep structure of reality. So here it is that. When he's saying Dharma, consider it this deep structure of reality. Dharma addresses the root causes of suffering and requires that we take a hard look at the preconceptions that maintain our worldview and perpetuate our problems. So when we get on the spiritual path, conscience plays a really important part. Self-reflection plays a really important part. So when things are happening that are showing us our misalignment, or where we are out of integrity, or where we can clean up something that we've done in a certain relationship, and we don't do that, what will happen in this feedback system of karma is that that lesson will get reprocessed and intensified, so that you're going to confront that same cause and effect relationship again, but because you weren't listening the first time, it'll get a little louder or more painful. It will get your attention a little bit more the second time. And if you're not listening the second time, it will keep getting louder. And sometimes, we just go on in our own oblivion, and we don't realize we're getting all of these warning signs like road closed, do not enter, bridge out, and we're just driving along in our life. And then we have this huge crisis. And if we were only self-reflecting, listening to the pangs of our conscience, seeing what's really going on in this feedback system, we could have done these micro adjustments long before things got out of control. Right? Don't we get that in hindsight oftentimes? When we're like crashing and burning, you're like, oh, so that's what that was about. So he says, again, all of this to say that it requires that we take a hard look at our preconceptions that maintain our worldview. And these preconceptions, he says, perpetuate our problems. As much as success seems to be the source of the good things in life, happiness included, success isn't the goal of spiritual practice. Listen to that. Success is not the goal of spiritual practice. Our ideas about success are themselves based on preconceptions and are also part of a self-perpetuating cycle, preventing us from achieving the genuine success and happiness that we seek. So, Jesus will say in A Course in Miracles, your greatest setbacks have been your greatest advances. And what you've considered your greatest wins were really your biggest losses. On the spiritual path, things are topsy-turvy. The ego wants its way. The ego wants to win. The ego wants to get stuff. The ego wants creature comfort. And when you get on this spiritual path, sometimes your greatest wins or breakthroughs is when you have that crisis, when you crash and burn. Because then you can actually open to grace. Then you're open to something other than your preconceived, conditioned responses and patterns and your preconceived views of success. Then B. Alan Wallace gets into what are called, in his words, the eight mundane concerns. I kind of like the other way of saying this, the 8 worldly wins. So the 8 mundane concerns are the 8 worldly winds. They blow through. They have power and direction and impact within these unseen places within us. These 8 worldly winds. What are they? Well, he defines them as 4 pairs of priorities. The pursuit of material acquisition and the avoidance of the loss of material acquisitions. the pursuit of stimulus-driven pleasure, and the avoidance of discomfort. The pursuit of praise and the avoidance of blame. And finally, the pursuit of good reputation and the avoidance of bad reputation. So again, the drive to get things and to keep them, the drive to pleasure yourself and avoid any kind of discomfort or pain, the drive to garner praise and avoid blame, and this drive to have a good reputation and not a bad reputation. That's why they're like winds. It's driven behavior. And so he says this is what all ordinary people are living for. I mean, again, this is about introspection. Check it out. Look at yourself. Are you driven by one or more than one of these 8 worldly pursuits or wins? Sometimes, for me, like the top of the list is like the pursuit of praise and the avoidance of blame. Like, I want to be a good boy. I want to have done it right. I want to make sure that people are happy with how I show up. Like, so that looks innocent, right? I want to do good. I want to be of service. I want to help. I want to give. And that's actually a worldly wind. It doesn't mean, and he's going to say it in a moment, doesn't mean that when you put things into perspective that you're not going to be of service and have this wish to, help out in the world. But if, things aren't going your way and that pursuit comes to nothing, you yourself are untroubled by it. You're not bought into it. You're not identified with it. Right, so again, if I don't get praise, like if, I've had the experiences, talking about crashing and burning, of being up here on a Sunday morning and things didn't go the way that I wanted, so I didn't get my praise. And I'm driving home blaming myself. And it's torture to be caught in these worldly winds, yes? He says the 8 mundane concerns are not wrong in themselves. They underlie our motivation, and it is motivation more than any other single factor that determines the outcome of spiritual practice. So hear that again. Motivation is the most important element that determines the outcome of your spiritual practice. Your intention, your motivation. Why are you doing what you're doing? What's driving that behavior? So looking at your motivation, you can see and gauge what is really, what your spiritual practice is really about. And then, he says there's nothing bad in having these acquisitions, but just don't be seeing them as the end-all and be-all. He says the problem is that when we focus on mundane concerns as a means to happiness, life becomes a crapshoot. There are no guarantees. If you aspire to material wealth, you may not get it. But if you do, there's no guarantee you'll be happy. If you aspire to pleasure, once a stimulus is over, so is satisfaction. There is no lasting happiness in scurrying after praise. People who are respected and famous tend to have the same personal problems as everyone else, especially if you're a child star. The fatal shortcoming of the 8 mundane concerns is that they are counterfeit dharma. Counterfeit dharma. Misguided ways of seeking happiness. And by habitually mistaking mundane concerns for genuine dharma, our efforts to achieve genuine happiness are continually undermined. So counterfeit dharma is you'll be rich and successful if you have this job, if you have a wife that looks like this, if you live in this house, in this neighborhood, in this part of the country, if you drive this car, if you wear these clothes, if you've gone to these schools. Like all of that is counterfeit. It's not the real thing. The real thing is what's motivating you in your interior life. And if you're associating yourself with material pursuits, I said motivating yourself in your interior life. If you're associating yourself with finding happiness in material pursuits, you're living a counterfeit life. That's essentially what's being said. So, finally here, the first point of the mind training, or this attitudinal training, which is really, again, the bedrock of our conversation this morning, the first point of the mind training is to train in the preliminaries in order to be able to differentiate between genuine and counterfeit dharma. Right? So cultivating discernment between what is real happiness and what is counterfeit happiness. What's really going to take me to my goal and what's going to prohibit me from getting to my goal. Because think about this, you're on a journey. You're on a spiritual journey. And if you don't cultivate that discerning quality, then you're wanting to reach a goal. But if you don't have that discernment, the goal can be easily counterfeited. And you'll end up shipwrecked, so to speak, because you won't have stayed on the straight path. You would have gotten off an exit, and when you do, it's a really twisted and windy road. And sometimes, I think guys more than ladies would recognize this. Like when you do take a wrong turn, somehow it will work out, and you just have to keep driving, and you never think to stop, reflect, turn around, and get back on that straight path. And that's what he's saying. If you bank on achieving genuine happiness and fulfillment by finding the perfect mate, getting a great car, having a big house, the best insurance, a fine reputation, the top job, if these are your focus, wish also for luck in life's lottery. The objective of the first point is to save time, right? Discerning genuine from counterfeit. Don't wait until you are 80 years old to realize the shortcomings of the 8 mundane concerns. Examine your priorities now. There is no need to reject these mundane concerns altogether. What is necessary is to shift your primary investment elsewhere to what is genuine, what is spiritually sound. Once priorities shift, the mundane concerns serve as supports for your spiritual practice. Learning to distinguish between the many types of pseudo-success, the many facsimiles of happiness, and genuine happiness saves time and grief in the long run. Make sense? So, we talked about these 3 steps or stages from the Islamic perspective. From the ancient Indian perspective, there are also 3 steps, and what would help us here is, we're in a place at first when we're listening to the teaching, right? Shravana, we're listening, we're taking in information. And as we take in this information, we may or may not go to that second stage. The second stage is you begin to really turn it over in your mind, and you begin to kind of reflect and see it from different angles and digest it and chew on it and work through it, so that you begin to think that these instructions actually could be applied or that they do have value. And then as you do this second stage, the third stage may open up, and that is you begin to deeply contemplate or meditate on these instructions, and they literally become integral to your being. They become a part of you, right? So that we don't just think about goodness, we become goodness. We don't just think about generosity, we become generosity. We don't just think about patience, we become patient, compassionate, right? Loving. So this is the idea. What's in the way of that? That's the second stage. Okay, so I'm beginning to chew on these values and these meanings and beginning to see where I'm falling short in myself. Like, this is one of the reasons why there's the pull or the drive for counterfeit spirituality. Real spirituality can hurt sometimes, it's confronting. It's like sometimes I open the Bible or any holy book, and it's like I'm looking into a mirror and I see myself. Not the way that I like to be seen, but I actually see myself the way that I am with all of my warts. And what I can do then is either, shut the book and go the other way, or deal with it, look at it, And I actually have a living book too that I spend a lot of time with. And so the idea is that we are on a journey, either whether it be a spiritual journey that is, just all about me and feeling good, and it's kind of narcissistic, and it's about me getting what makes me happy, and I'll call that God. God can come along on that journey. It'll be like, I want to attract the perfect mate and the perfect car and the perfect job, and, abracadabra, thank you, God. Or I can really do the deep work of cultivating my character and deeply reflecting on areas where I'm falling short and having the light come into these darkened places within myself, as much as it may hurt. Because what happens in the genuine spiritual practice is the divine starts to come in. Remember Ixon, you act as if God is present. Well, when you start to do that as a practice, God becomes present. And there's nothing more beautiful than that presence. It says in the scriptures that you'll be like one who's planted by rivers of living water. You'll never dry up. You'll always have your resources flowing. So your 8 worldly concerns will take care of themselves, but you're more concerned with the living water of the divine presence. Everything else is secondary, come what may. If it comes or not, I have the treasure already. So this is why we cultivate our character, right? For the true value. And we get our priorities straight as a result. So on that note, we're going to look first in the book of Psalms. And did you know that the book of Psalms was the hymn book? It was the hymn book of the Jerusalem temple. So this was their song book. And it's just profound how deep and instructive these teachings are. And to think that these are songs. So when you hear this, know that you could have been singing this in the temple as just part of the service. So this is why, this Psalm 15 is saying, using the term Lord, which really is Yahweh, who may be a guest in your home. So you're singing this in the temple. So who can come into your house and hang out with you? What kind of person can be a guest in your house? And so this is all about character building. In fact, in the New English translation with the notes, it says that that this psalm describes the character qualities that one must possess to be allowed access to the divine presence. So do you see how character either dials you in or dials you out of divine presence? The divine presence is infinite and always flowing and always here. You could dial in or you could dial out. Your awareness is determined by your motivation and by your character qualities. That's why Jesus again says the entire course is to have you meet the conditions of reality. Then the door will open and you'll enter. So what kind of person can hang out with God in his house? Who may live on your holy hill? Whoever lives a blameless life. And there's that word tamim that we were talking about. A person who has ultra integrity, a blameless life, right? Who does what is right and speaks honestly. He does not slander or do harm to others or insult his neighbor. He despises those who live wickedly, but honors those who are aligning themselves with reality. A little embellishment on my part, but staying true to the text. He makes firm commitments and does not renege on his promise. Other translations say he gives his word and he'll keep his word even if it pains him. So in other words, a character quality is be your word. Do what you say you're going to do. Don't renege on your promises. Right? He does not charge interest when he lends his money. So we're not all money lenders, right? We're not all bankers, and we're not maybe doing that literally. But it's kind of like he doesn't live quid pro quo. In other words, if I do a favor for you, I'm not thinking you owe me now. Right? Did you ever come across people like that? Or maybe at one time you were like that? If you're still like that, I don't want to know you. No, I'm joking. But sometimes it's like we assume because I'm doing this for somebody, well, it's just part of the deal that at another time I'll ask them and they'll have to say yes because I did this for them, 2 months ago. He does not take bribes to testify against the innocent. Right? So he doesn't take sides and lie to protect people that he likes. Right? Like sometimes you get into family squabbles, and when you're dealing with maybe the person's problematic in the family, who knows? But sometimes people are having an issue with a family member or a friend, and just because you are loyal to this person and you actually discern that they're not right here, and you take their side anyway, that's kind of like bearing false witness. Right? You can see how you can find nuances here. So having integrity throughout. So again, those are the character qualities that we're talking about. Living honestly, not slandering, not harming others, not insulting or gossiping, right? Staying away from bad company, people that are not living in integrity, you don't want to hang out with them, right? And finding good associations, hanging out with people that are living with integrity. So there you go. And a couple more here. This is from the book of Proverbs, and this is Proverbs chapter 10, verse 9. It says, "The one who conducts himself in integrity will live securely, but the one who behaves perversely will be found out." The one who conducts himself in integrity will live securely. So there were times in my life where I did not live in integrity, and I had to go to court, and I had all of these problems. I picked the wrong partners to be with, and it's not that they did me wrong or the system did me wrong. It was I was out of integrity. And because I wasn't dialed into reality and living with, self-reflection and deep insight and taking care of my character flaws, my karma, my feedback was coming. It was exactly what I needed, right? And it got louder and louder and more painful to the point where I was like, okay, I get it. I was an idiot. I was just bashing through those signs, road closed, don't enter, bridge out. And then you finally start to go, oh, right. Total moron. But thank God, you know. So, a couple more. Every wise woman has built her household, but a foolish woman tears it down with her own hands. The one who walks in uprightness has respect for the deep structure of reality. Again, my embellishment. But the one who is perverted or twisted in his ways despises the deep structure of reality or the Lord. So how do you know you're truly loving God? You walk in integrity. You have a character that is what we're talking about, that is keeping their word, living honestly, not bearing false witness, etc. How do you know that you're not really loving God? You're perverted in your ways. You're twisted. You're dishonest. You're, in shadow. You're, that kind of a thing. So when it first, lands on the ear, totally simple. Like, yeah, I get it. But, it reminds me of that Chinese story where the guy climbs this mountain to find the sage. And he finally, after all of this struggle, gets to the temple where the sage is. And he's like, finally, tell me the secret to life. And the sage said, do good. Don't do bad. And the guy's like, a 3-year-old knows that. And then he said, an 80-year-old has trouble doing it. So this is the simplicity of the teaching, but don't think that simplicity is simplistic. These are the kernels that when you chew on them and allow them to develop in your thinking and influence you, they open the door to the kingdom of God. Your character is everything. So the Urantia book, who knows about the Urantia book? Yes? So it was supposedly channeled beginning in 1908 for, I think, 10 years or so. Dr. William Sadler and his wife, he was a surgeon, a psychiatrist, a public speaker. He was a man of many talents, very, very bright man. And the origin story of the Urantia book, in brief, is that the Sadlers lived in this apartment complex, and they got a knock on the door one night from a neighbor. And she was distraught because her husband, for the past several nights, has been staying asleep but speaking these wild and strange things. And so the Sadlers, again, both being doctors, she was a doctor as well, go to the apartment, see this guy who's asleep, and begin to hear what's coming out of his mouth. And it was, celestial communication is the way that they described it. There are these high teachings coming through what Dr. Sadler would eventually call the sleeping subject. And so the origin story goes that they eventually began to write down these teachings, and the Urantia book began to be formed. And it's 2,000 pages. If you want a different version of the origin story, this woman, she's a historian and a scholar. Her name is Sue Oliva. She wrote a book about 10 years ago about William Sadler and the origin of the Urantia book. She also has an interview on YouTube. She's a student of the Urantia book since she was 17, so she doesn't have an axe to grind, but she challenges the origin story. And you can check that out if you have any interest. But the book itself is split up into 4 parts. You have the central and super universes. Part 2 is the local universe. Part 3 is the history of Urantia, which is the name of our planet. according to these celestial teachers. And then you have the life and teachings of Jesus. And they're all given by celestial beings, beings of high evolutionary development or beyond even evolutionary development, divine beings. We're not going to go too far into any of that today. We're going to actually pay attention to character development according to the Urantia book. I think you guys are going to like this. So this is paper 99, The Social Problems of Religion. Actually, no, I'm looking for paper 100, forgive me. Paper 100. Religion and Human Experience. And remember, religion is really just your relationship with divine presence, right? So the first section here in paper 100 is religious growth. And it says, while religion produces growth of meanings and enhancement of values, evil always results when purely personal evaluations are elevated to the levels of absolutes. So we were just reading from the book of Proverbs, and one of the ways that the book of Proverbs discriminates is between wisdom and folly, right? Wisdom good, folly bad. If you keep to the ways of wisdom, your life is going to work. Things will flow. You'll have wealth. You'll have beautiful children. You'll have a happy home. You'll be in right relation to God. Live by the attributes of wisdom. Cultivate wisdom. Don't cultivate folly because it's going to destroy your life. And the way that folly is described in the book of Proverbs is that it entices you to pleasure. Stolen water is sweet. Bread eaten in secret, like adulterous affairs. Come on in. My bed has been prepared. My husband's on vacation. Let's have our way of love. So that's the voice of folly, right? So you don't want to have your mind, your motivation attuned to folly. And the number one way of finding yourself in folly is that your pleasure is the absolute, right? You're not about expanding your meanings and your understanding and developing a higher state of consciousness so that you're in the presence of God consciously. No, no, no. Let me just pay attention to my animal appetites, and that's the good life. That's happiness. And what the Urantia book is just saying is that evil always results, right? Pain follows folly. Evil always results when purely personal evaluations, what I think is good, are elevated to the levels of absolutes. A child evaluates experience in accordance with the content of pleasure. Maturity is proportional to the substitution of higher meanings for personal pleasure. So in other words, you're willing as a mature person to put aside physical pleasure or even psychological and emotional pleasure to live with integrity, to honor your values, to stay true to your ideal. You're willing to forego creature comfort if it in any way impinges on your ideal, your relationship with God. Right? Even loyalties to the highest concepts of diversified life situations and cosmic relations. Okay, it gets really good here. So spiritual growth depends first on the maintenance of a living spiritual connection with true spiritual forces. And secondly, on the continuous bearing of spiritual fruit. So in other words, you're looking for an authentic experience, right? Not a counterfeit experience. And that means you're asking for the presence of God to come into your life. And you can feel the joy of that. There are active spiritual forces that begin to work in your mind. And as a result of these forces at play within your mind, your life reality begins to reflect it. Right? You begin to produce fruit. Discernment will follow. And then here, the goal of human self-realization should be spiritual, not material. Right? So the 8 worldly winds, right, that we were just talking about. The goal should not be material happiness, but spiritual happiness. The only realities worth striving for are divine, spiritual, and eternal. Mortal man is entitled to the enjoyment of physical pleasures and to the satisfaction of human affections. He is benefited by loyalty to human associations and temporal institutions, but these are not the eternal foundations upon which to build the immortal personality, which must transcend space, vanquish time, and achieve the eternal destiny of divine perfection and finaliter service. In other words, hanging out in the house of God. That's the finaliter service. And we just looked at the 5-dimensional hypercube from the Sefer Yetzirah. I knew you guys were thinking about that when you heard this. So in other words, the immortal personality, the 5D hypercube, transcends space, vanquishes time, and achieves eternal destiny because you're morally tuned in to the house of God. Okay? I'm sorry, I'm such a nerd. Jesus portrayed the profound surety of the God-knowing mortal when he said, to a God-knowing kingdom believer, what does it matter if all things earthly crash? Temporal securities are vulnerable, but spiritual sureties are impregnable. When the flood tides of human adversity, selfishness, cruelty, hate, malice, and jealousy beat about the mortal soul, you may rest in the assurance that there is one inner bastion, the citadel of the Spirit, which is absolutely unassailable. At least this is true of every human being who has dedicated the keeping of his soul to the indwelling Spirit of the eternal God. So no matter what happens in the outer world, if the financial markets crash, if World War III begins to erupt, you have a citadel of the Spirit that you will always feel the safety and the security and the peace because your values don't come from the external world. You're cultivating the immortal spirit. After such spiritual attainment, whether secured by gradual growth or specific crisis, right? So this can happen organically and bit by bit, or you can come to this realization through crisis. There occurs a new orientation of personality as well as the development of a new standard of values. Right? You have a breakthrough in character development. So your character shifts from being driven by material gains and ego agendas to waking up to the spiritual value of an immortal personality. Such spirit-born individuals are so remotivated in life that they can calmly stand by while their fondest ambitions perish and their keenest hopes crash. Calmly stand by while it all goes to hell. That's character. That's 101 spiritual training. They positively know that such catastrophes are but the redirecting cataclysms which wreck one's temporal creations preliminary to the rearing of the more noble and enduring realities of a new and more sublime level of universe attainment. So In the Hindu Trimurti, the three gods of the Hindu creation, you have Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. Shiva is the destroyer, right? So what he's just saying is when Shiva does his dance in your life and wipes out all of your ambitions, all of your hopes, all of your value, everything that you've identified with as good and success and what I needed and who I needed to be, and you can actually sit in the citadel of your spirit and know this was a redirecting cataclysm. My fatal illness is a redirecting cataclysm. My divorce is a redirecting cataclysm. My financial losses, redirecting cataclysms, so that I can be remotivated to find what truly matters in my life, what's really worth living for. Who am I? Am I the temporary or am I the enduring? Speaking of enduring, our service is not going to endure much more of this. Problems of growth. Let's see. Is that where I want it? Let's do this. So I wish I had more time. This whole paper is actually amazing. Paper 100, if you have the Arancha book, you might want to look at it. But this section, the last section in the paper, is the acme of religious living, right? The pinnacle, the full flowering of character. And they use Jesus as the example, right? So Jesus is the apex in the Arancha book. He's considered the creator God coming into humanity to uplift the whole species. And so his character was impeccable. Listen to what it says about Jesus. Although the average mortal of Urantia cannot hope to attain the high perfection of character which Jesus of Nazareth acquired while sojourning in the flesh, it is altogether possible for every mortal believer to develop a strong and unified personality along the perfected lines of the Jesus personality. He set the template. These are spiritual forces. The template is still radiating within the unseen. These are lines of force. They're transmissions or certain wavelengths of frequency. When you dial in with your motivation, you actually pick up the Jesus personality and you attune to it. Right? This is your character development in that sense, is what they're saying. The unique feature of the Master's personality was not so much its perfection as its symmetry, its exquisite and balanced unification. The most effective presentation of Jesus consists in following the example of the one who said, as he gestured toward the Master standing before his accusers, "Behold the man." So now he goes through this paean of Jesus' character. The unfailing kindness of Jesus touched the hearts of men, but his stalwart strength of character amazed his followers. He was truly sincere. There was nothing of the hypocrite in him. He was free of affectation or emotionalism. He was always so refreshingly genuine. He never stooped to pretense, and he never resorted to shamming. He lived the truth even as he taught it. He was the truth. He was constrained to proclaim saving truth to his generation, even though such sincerity sometimes caused pain. He was unquestioningly loyal to all truth, but the Master was so reasonable, so approachable. He was so practical in all his ministry, while all his plans were characterized by such sanctified common sense. He was so free from all freakish, erratic, and eccentric tendencies. Right? He was never capricious, whimsical, or hysterical. In all his teachings and in everything he did, there was always an exquisite discrimination associated with an extraordinary sense of propriety. The Son of Man was always well poised. Even his enemies maintained a wholesome respect for him. They even feared his presence. Jesus was unafraid. He was surcharged with divine enthusiasm, but he never became fantastical, rather fanatical. He was emotionally active, but never flighty. He was imaginative, but always practical. He frankly faced the realities of life, but he was never dull or prosaic. He was courageous, but never reckless, prudent, but never cowardly. He was sympathetic, but not sentimental, unique, but not eccentric. He was pious, but not sanctimonious. And the most original of his teachings was the emphasis of love and mercy in the place of fear and sacrifice. Finally here, just so much that we have to leave out because of time. Jesus was great because he was good, and yet he fraternized with the little children. He was gentle and unassuming in his personal life, and yet he was the perfected man of a universe. His associates called him master, unbidden. Jesus was the perfectly unified human personality, and today, as in Galilee, he continues to unify mortal experience and to coordinate human endeavors. He unifies life, ennobles character, and simplifies experience. He enters the human mind to elevate, transform, and transfigure it. It is literally true. If any man has Christ Jesus within him, he is a new creature. Old things are passing away. Behold, all things are becoming new. Blue bag's going to go around. I ran a couple minutes over. I apologize for that. If you are joining on Facebook or YouTube, you can click the link below and donate to the 8 a.m. service. The church and I are greatly appreciative of your generosity, a good character quality. Any thoughts or questions? David?
Yeah, as we heard the message today, I just couldn't help but think of someone I think would dovetail into what you were telling us, is a current author and journalist by the name of David Brooks. And Mr. Brooks has written some books, and one of them is Understanding Other People, basically. And and what he said, in this world there are illuminators and diminishers. Which one do you want to choose to be?
Whether an illuminator or an administrator?
No, diminisher.
Oh, diminisher. Okay, I didn't mean to diminish administrators.
No.
Uh-huh, yes.
Comparison.
Yes, yes, speaking life or speaking death.
Okay. And he's a reporter, journalist for the New York Times,
Uh-huh,
and he's also an author. That's where the book comes from.
okay, all right.
And
David Brooks.
yeah, and in his, not a religious scholar at all.
Mm-hmm,
But my point is that I think this seeking, this pathway that we're all on,
mm-hmm,
I think it just continues with challenges and wisdom even today. And he was asked on public television, he's a commentator on there, and he was asked by the moderator, what is your view on our current Mideast crisis?
okay,
And this is the kind of attitude that he has. He said, I think that Israel should make some friends in the neighborhood, meaning
yeah,
being in the region there.
yeah,
And he, just what you were saying about Jesus and about that perspective, you know, you can be empathetic, but you don't have to be sympathetic and so on. And I think he's pretty close to achieving that.
very good.
I like the guy. He's a classical conservative, and he's a moral person.
Excellent. And I want to be a moral person too and hold my time to a minimum now. Thank you, David, for sharing that. David Brooks, if anybody wants to look him up. I've heard him mentioned recently by another person that I know, spoke highly of him. We bless this offering. We thank those who gave and those who did not, because we are all learning and growing no matter what, that we may receive the blessings and walk in the light of our truth. And so it is. Amen. Let's rise and seal the deal. As we quiet the heart and enter into that citadel of the Spirit, where the world and all of its activity cannot touch, in this stainless purity of Holy Communion, we know that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you again soon. And remember, good things are coming.